Hello, I'm Nora, and welcome back to Novels with Nora. If this is your first time seeing me and one of my videos, you will not know this, but I just got my hair cut, and so this is my haircut's first channel debut. So I used to have like longer hair, and now I've got this like long bob, and I love it so much. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, today is going to be my August wrap-up, which feels crazy that we're already through August. So you know, I feel like the end of the year is really like creeping up on us, but I read 7 books this month, which is super exciting because my fall semester started up towards the end of August, so I didn't know how much I'd actually be reading, but I read quite a decent amount. However, you have seen me talk about all except one of these books, so I imagine this will be a shorter video again for my wrap up. I feel like I say that every month when you've seen all the books that I talk about, and yet I still manage to make them like at least 15 minutes. So we'll see how long this ends up being, but you have heard me talk about all except one of these books so far. But let's just get into it and go through all the books I read this month. So like I said, I read 7 books, and the first book I read, which is the only book you haven't heard me talk about, is Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. Now, if you saw my Summerween reading vlog, you would have seen me try to read Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle, and I ended up DNFing it, but I also had this one checked out from the library, and I decided just to give it a try because the writing wasn't the problem, it was like the plot and the characters. So I said, let me give this one a try, and I ended up really liking this. I liked it so much, in fact, that it got 4.5 stars from me, which is quite a high rating, especially because I had DNF'd one of his books before. But like, I knew that something that he had written would be for me because, again, the writing I really enjoyed. It was just the plot of Bury Your Gaze that I didn't really mesh with, but this I loved so much. This follows our main character as she is living in this very religious town, and she has like very strict religious parents, and she also subscribes to this religion. She herself is very religious, but she starts to realize that like there's gaps in her memory, and like there's just things that she's forgetting, but also at the same time she's having like visions of things, but like they're memories, and she can feel like the emotions connected to them, but she can't remember who the girl in those memories is, but she knows that it's important. Come to find out, everything circles back to the religious conversion camp that her church runs, Camp Damascus. And so I went into this thinking that it was going to be her at camp, which is not the case. So don't go into it thinking that, because my brother also read this and he disliked it because the whole time he was thinking, okay, when are we getting to the camp? And that's just not what this is. It's more about her like taking down the camp and like reclaiming her identity outside of the religion, which I really loved. I really did enjoy this. It was sapphic. It was lovely. Like, I really enjoyed it. A lot of the conversations in here aligned with like my personal beliefs on religion, which is why I think it worked so well for me. So, and those beliefs being that like you can still have faith, it just doesn't necessarily need to be within the bonds of an organized religion, and that's like exactly what this was saying. So I really enjoyed this one, and I will give Chuck Tingle another chance because, again, I really loved this. Even though I DNF'd Bury Your Gaze, I'm really glad I picked this up because I ended up really loving it, and it was a great start to the month. Then I moved on to my Buzzwordathon vlog for August, which again you've already seen, and for that I started with The Princess and the Scoundrel by Beth Rebus, which is a Star Wars novel, and I loved this. Princess Leia and Han Solo are like my original like ship. Like, I love them so much. I've been watching Star Wars since I was like a baby practically. So this was just like, it was so beautiful, and it follows them as they go on their honeymoon, and obviously things go awry because it's right after the destruction of the Death Star and the fall of the Empire. But through this we're learning that there's still like footholds of the Empire that Han and Leia are then trying to take down, and it's kind of just like starting them on their journey of a married couple, but also forming a new relationship outside of war, and just like what that entails for them and how they can be there for each other. Especially, we're seeing a lot of then Leia's grief as her entire home has been destroyed, and how the concept of home now has to really change for her because there's no genuine home to go back to outside of Han, and so like Han becomes her new home. Absolutely love this. This was a 5-star. I loved it. Like, it was just so good. Something that I love a lot about the Star Wars novels is it adds so much emotion and depth to the characters that, yes, is there in the movies, but because there's so many characters and it's like so expansive, it's just a little bit harder to like get as deep into, and the books just do such a great job. And also highly recommend listening to Star Wars audiobooks. They're like full productions, sound effects, music, like voice, like it. So good. Highly recommend. After that, also for Buzzwordathon, I picked up Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph White, and I again really enjoyed this one. This one was 4 stars for me. I feel like it was, I don't want to say slow going in the beginning, but there were a lot of times where I was like, things are happening, but I feel like we're not getting anywhere. Like, we're doing a lot, but we're staying stagnant in the story, which I didn't love. But this follows our main character as he is in this like doomsday religious cult, pretty much, who has wiped out like 90% of Earth's population by unleashing this thing called the Flood, which was like this disease pretty much, and he has been injected with a version of the Flood that is turning him into like their like savior. So it's like killing him from the inside out, turning him into this like biblical monster angel thing. And he is trans, but his religion still only sees him as a girl. And so he's dealing with that. And then, well, as soon as the book starts, it's him and his dad trying to escape, and then him witnessing his dad get brutally killed. So then he ends up managing to escape, I guess you could say, and ends up with this LGBTQ youth center that has become like a point of safety for a lot of the teens in the area. And so he starts to explore his identity more, explore possibly some romantic connections, while also trying to take down this cult by using the gift that they have given him of the disease that he is carrying. And I really enjoyed it. Again, a lot of religious trauma I've been reading lately, but I did really enjoy this. I loved Andrew Joseph White's writing, and I definitely will be picking more things up from him. I think he has 2 other YA novels and then an adult novel coming out either later this year or next year. And so I definitely will be reading more from him because I loved the writing in here. There were just points where I could see like points of improvement really, but this is a debut novel, so like that's to be expected, and so I can't wait to read more from him. Then in my most recent vlog that you would have seen, which went up today, my time, I read books that were recommended by Books and Lala here on booktube, and so I read quite a few things that I had picked up and was interested in because of her talking about them. The first of that being Monstrilio by Gerardo Samano Cordova, and I love this. This follows this couple, Joseph and Magos, who have a son, Santiago, and he was born with only 1 lung, and so he eventually does pass, and in her grief, Magos cuts him open and takes a piece of his lung, and then ends up feeding it, which it then turns into this Monstrilio creature. And it's really just a story about love and loss, and love being used to fill the void of grief, and just so many wonderful conversations were had in here about like different ways that people process grief and how not everyone's grief looks the same, and that can really be a point of contention within relationships. And it was just so beautiful and so wonderful. And this is something that even in that vlog I mentioned that I would not have picked up without Books and Lala's recommendation, and I ended up giving it 5 stars and really loving it, and I still think about it, and just like how there are just so many things in here that are just so well done and so beautiful. And for this being a debut, it was just so well done, so beautiful, really loved it. After that, I picked up Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett, and I enjoyed this. I thought it was fine. This follows Emily Wilde as she is writing an Encyclopedia of Fairies. She is a scholar, and in this world that Heather Fawcett has created, fairies and like the fair folk exist, and everyone knows they exist, and then there's like a whole section of like scholarly research done on them, and Emily Wilde is one of those scholars. And so she ends up going to this like icy cold Nordic type village to write an entry on their fair folk and their fairies that they have there, and her academic rival slash co-worker Wendell Bamblebee shows up, and Emily has a suspicion that he is a fairy, and there's like some romantic connection there. They end up having to like go on all these missions together to like save the people of the village and do their research and like try and help each other out. And I enjoyed a lot of this. There was also a lot of it I didn't like. I don't really like Wendell as a love interest, which I think is kind of a controversial take, but I just feel like he is only in the research for like his very own specific gain, and like Emily is in it for like the love of what she does, and I just feel like I just don't really like them together. I like them individually, I just don't like them as a couple. And I'm not going to continue on with the series to like potentially grow my feelings for them. I don't know. I enjoyed the like academia of it all. I just didn't love the relationship, which I think is like supposed to be like one of the driving factors here. And I also thought that the investigation into Wendell as a potential fairy was going to be like the driving plot through the series, and then it's not. So a lot of my expectations were subverted in a way that I actually didn't end up enjoying. So this was 3.5 stars. Then I had a DNF of My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. I'm not going to talk about this too much because I did go in depth on why I DNF'd it in that vlog, but Stephen Graham Jones' writing just isn't for me when it comes to like the slasher genre, because I had read last month I Was a Teenage Slasher from him, and I had the same issues with it where we just like kept like, it just felt so overwritten for like no real reason, and it just kind of like took me out of it, and I felt like I couldn't get into it. I did not like Jade as the main character. It really was not for me. But this follows Jade, the main character, who is absolutely obsessed with like 80s slasher films, and then in her town she starts to suspect that the slasher cycle is starting with the people in her town, and so she is trying to put all the pieces together of like who's going to be the final girl, who's going to be the first victim, and she's like trying to warn people, but they're not really listening to her. They just think that like she needs help, and it just wasn't for me, so I ended up DNFing this one. Then I went to one of my new favorite books of all time, We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Barry. I cannot say enough good things about this book. I loved it so much. This follows the 1989 Danvers High School women's field hockey team, and they are in Danvers, Massachusetts, which is like right next to Salem. So as you can imagine, lots of like witchy, witchcraft, supernatural things happening here. maybe. And it just follows this group of girls as they're kind of like coming into themselves and realizing that like the people they want to be have been inside them the whole time. They just maybe needed a little push to like bring that out of themselves. And it was just so wonderful. I really love books that are just about like a group of girls specifically just like really finding themselves and like exploring their connections with each other and like with like romantic connections. It was just so wonderful, and it's like everything that I loved was in here. It was so wonderful. 5 stars. And I knew like as soon as I started it that it was going to be 5 stars. Like it never had a chance to be anything else. I love this so much. And yes, there is kind of like a little bit of like the witchy like Salem aspect, because they do like go to Salem for Halloween, and so you have that aspect. But to me, what made me love this so much was just like the character growth and just like seeing all of them come together as like a group and just like the girlhood of it all. I love this so much. And then our final book of the month was Bunny by Mona Awad, a booktube darling. And I didn't love it. I ended up giving this 3 stars because I truly feel just very meh about it. Like I don't really have any strong feelings in any direction about it. I will not be picking up the prequel/sequel We Love You Bunny. I have no desire to read any more in this world. And I think a lot of that comes down to, for me, I love a character-driven story, and I did not feel connected to any of the characters in here, which I think was kind of intentional, but it just made it so that I wasn't really enjoying it. But this follows Samantha as she is in an MFA program at an incredibly exclusive, like elite school, and she is in like a creative block. Like she's not writing, she just feels very out of it, but she also feels like part of the problem is that she feels like she's being held at a distance from the other girls in her program, the bunnies, who are these 4 girls who all refer to each other as Bunny, and they are like very much a clique, and she is not in on that, and so she feels like she's being held at a distance. And so there's a lot of conversations about like, is she holding herself at the distance, or is she actually being held at a distance by these other girls? She ends up getting involved with the bunnies, and everything that ensues from there is crazy and wild, and I don't think I could even explain it to you if I tried, but it was interesting. I just didn't find myself really caring, especially because for me, when I read, I want to love the characters, I want to root for them, I want to be involved in their lives, and that just did not happen here. So this was a 3 star for me, but I am glad to have read it. Like I don't regret the time I spent with it. I had a decent time reading it, and like I kept thinking like, oh, I could put it down, but I was like, no, I kind of want to know what happens. So like I'm glad that I finished it. I just feel like meh. And those are the 7 books that I read this month and the 1 DNF that I had. So I would say overall quite a good reading month. I had 2 5 stars and quite a few things that I just enjoyed reading. So now transitioning over to my stats for this month. Like I said, I read 7 books, which is 2,294 pages, which is pretty good for me. My most read genre was horror, which makes sense. And then I had 3 5 stars. Okay, so I was wrong before. I did have 3 5 stars. I forgot about Princess and the Scoundrel because that to me is just like, I don't even know. I feel like the Star Wars books almost always get 5 stars for me just because I love Star Wars so much and it's so nostalgic to me. Sometimes I forget that I also rate them 5 stars. So 3 5 stars, 1 4.5 star, 1 4 star, 1 3.5 star, and then 1 3 star. So nothing lower than a 3 star, which is pretty good. But even the 3 star, which was Bunny, I feel like it just because I'm just like so neutral on it, like that just feels like the most neutral rating. And then I read 2 books physically, 1 book fully audio, and then 4 books physical and audio, which is very typical for me. And then I read 2 young adult novels, 1 new adult, which is where I'm putting Camp Damascus, just because it follows our main character who's 20. In her religion, they like skip a year, so she's like still in high school, but she's older. So I put that one as new adult just because it didn't quite feel YA, but it also didn't feel adult. So I put that one there. And then technically for adult, but We Ride Upon Sticks, I feel like it doesn't really perfectly fit in any age genre because yes, it's about teenage girls, but it doesn't feel YA to me. So that one I guess could also be new adult, but it also just feels very like limbo, I guess you could say. So I read 4 horror, 1 sci-fi, 1 fantasy, and 1 mystery. And the mystery comes from, again, We Ride Upon Sticks, just because I don't know how to classify that. I feel like I've put it as speculative fiction because it's not fantasy, it's not quite horror, but I also wouldn't say it's a mystery. Like, I don't really know, but I do feel like speculative fiction is the best way I would break this down. The Google sheet I used, it doesn't have that as an option, but I would say that this is more speculative fiction. So those are all my stats for the month, and now let's talk about my reading challenges that I've set for myself. And let me just say, we're not doing super great. Now, Buzzwordathon, doing fantastic. I've done January through August, both prompts, because there's a title prompt and a cover prompt for each month, and I've done all of them. So I have read 16 books for Buzzwordathon so far, which is 1 book for every prompt every month, which I'm very happy about. However, I have made no progress in any of my other reading challenges. So the main one that I'm working on is my alphabet reading challenge, where I want to read a book with a title corresponding to every letter of the alphabet. And I have not made progress in a while because the letters I have left are J, F, X, and Z. So only 4 left, but letters that like are significantly harder to find. Now J and F I have something planned for, but X and Z, we'll see what ends up happening. But this month I did not contribute to that at all. And then my other big challenge that I've undertaken this year is the r/fantasy reading challenge, and that's like a full year long reading challenge. It's like a bingo board, and I have not read anything else for that this month because the prompts are like quite specific, and so things I'm just picking up like for myself or for other things don't really tend to fit those prompts, so have not made any progress there. But like I think I'm still like 46% of the way through that one, so still like making good progress, just not every month, if that makes sense. And then my final challenge for myself was to read 1 nonfiction book a month, and I have not done that in several months. You saw the books I read this month. There's no nonfiction in there. I feel like especially as I'm getting back into school and I'm reading a lot of like heavier, denser academic texts, I'm just wanting to read less and less nonfiction. So I really just need to make sure that I'm prioritizing that going forward, especially because there's only 4 months left in the year, which is crazy. But I do want to make sure that I'm prioritizing that because I keep buying nonfiction books, but then I'm not reading them. So I do want to make sure that I'm really prioritizing that going forward. It's just harder now that I'm in school. I just feel like I want to escape into like fiction rather than nonfiction. So hopefully going forward, I will contribute to that more than I have been. And that brings us to the end of this wrap up. I had a really great reading month, but I feel like this video is on the shorter side just because you've already heard me talk about all of these books. And I did love a lot of them. My favorite book of the month, obviously, We Ride Upon Sticks. Please read this book. It is so good. It's from 2020, so it's like a little bit older, but I promise you it is so good. It is genuinely one of my favorite books of all time now. It has moved its way up into my top 5 books of the year, and so I don't know what it's going to replace, but it's replacing something because I love it that much. So that's all I have to share with you today. I know this video was on the shorter side, but that's how my reading month went, and you've seen all of these things. And I feel like that's one thing that I'm really loving about having my booktube channel is that even when I'm not really feeling like I like the itch to read, I'm like, well, I still need to read for my videos and things, but then the things that I'm reading I'm absolutely loving. So it really is like the best of both worlds here, and I'm having a great time. So I want to know how your reading month was. How many books did you read? Did you find any new favorites? Did you give anything 5 stars this month? I would love to know. But otherwise, thank you so much for being here. I hope you like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you in another video again soon. Bye!